You never know what piece of content is going to change your life forever. And when most people hear that, myself included, you usually think, well, what one of my pieces of content are going to go viral? That's usually what you think. But that article that I wrote is, to this day, one of the least viewed, least liked articles I've ever written. It was just seen by the right person.
You just heard from our good friend Jordan Syatt. He's our guest today, and if you're in the world of fitness, you most likely know who he is. He's been the personal trainer for Gary Vaynerchuk for the past 3 years. And unlike most of us who have personal trainers who we call on once a week or twice a week, he basically lived with the man, traveled with the man 24/7 to hundreds of locations across the country, internationally, and he's built a crazy, impressive, massive following on social media. ZG, we learned a lot. What will our listeners learn listening to this podcast episode?
One thing that you and I should learn is that we should spend 24/7 with some crazy entrepreneur. This is an incredible journey he had. I can't wait for our listeners to hear about this. But here are 3 takeaways that we learned. We learned the theory of detention and what that means to Jordan Syatt and how he spent time in detention. We also learned how the smarter you sound, the less people you actually help. And the last thing that was a huge takeaway for us is the difference between creating content that you want to go viral versus creating content that you want to go super deep with people that matter. This episode rocks. We learned a lot.
So excited. Let's jump right into it. Whenever you got into powerlifting and fitness and health and nutrition in the first place, whether it was through school, or how did you find yourself in that world?
So I started wrestling when I was 8 years old. I started wrestling and I fell in love with it. I was obsessed with it. It's all I thought about. I remember when my mom first suggested it to my older brother and I only knew about WWE, WWF style wrestling. And so when she was like, yeah, I want you two to wrestle, I was like, you want me to hit someone with a chair? And she was like, no, it's Olympic style wrestling. And so I immediately fell in love with it. I was obsessed with it. I did it from 8 years old all the way to 18 years old. And I made varsity as a freshman in high school. I beat a junior out for the varsity spot, but I had to cut from 112 pounds to 103 pounds every week, sometimes multiple times a week in order to make weight. And as a freshman, I was 13, 14 years old, going up against juniors and seniors, 17, 18 years old. So my technique was good because I'd done it for just as long, if not longer than a lot of those kids. My endurance was good, but my strength was nowhere near where it needed to be in order to compete against kids 4 years older than me. So I ended up applying to a gym a couple towns over. And actually the first gym I applied to, they said, no, they don't want a high school kid walking around. And the second gym, they took me under their wing and I just applied as an intern. I was like, I'll take the trash out. I'll clean the floor. Like, let me just hang out here and learn. And that was my entry point into the fitness industry, which was when I was 14 years old.
Did someone give you that advice or is that something you kind of just said, you know what, I need help, I need support, I need to go find someone that can help me?
That specific instance was my own, but it was something that my mom taught me all throughout my life. Because I was in special education growing up. My brother is a very smart guy. He never really needed help with schoolwork or anything. I was always in special education classes and I hated it. I always felt really bad about it. And I would deliberately not ask for help because I felt like it was a weakness of mine that was already being given to me. But the older I got, the more I grew up, the more I realized asking for help was a good thing. And that was because of what my mom taught me. I applied to the first gym on my own as an intern and they denied me. And I was super upset about it. And I came back to my house. My mom was like, did you get it? And she was like, I was like, no. And I was really upset. And she was like, well, now what? And I said, what do you mean now what? And she was like, well, aren't you going to apply to another one? I was like, I didn't even think about that. So it was much of her influence that led to that.
Well then.
It seems like a lot of your documentation talks about a really positive and relationship with your mom. Some of the videos that I've watched, and even a couple of them, even your most famous video with Why You Quit Gary Vaynerchuk, it starts out with like an ode to your mom. And
yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your relationship and where it is now and kind of how it got really tight.
It's funny. If you listen to a conversation with my mom and I now, my girlfriend and I, my girlfriend and I have been together about 3 years and she still freaks out because my mom and I debate all the time. We constantly debate. We have not polar opposite, but pretty opposite political views. We have a lot of just competing beliefs. My mom was a very high-powered lawyer for the vast majority of her career. She's a very difficult woman to debate. It's very, very difficult, which is one of the reasons I think that I'm a big fan of debates in the fitness industry. Like, I enjoy it. I was brought up on it. My mom really fostered a debate household in terms of it wasn't just do what I say, it was question what I say and let's have a discussion about it. If you just heard on the surface a conversation with us, you might be like, wow, they're like really arguing. They don't get along well. But at the end of every debate, we're like, hey, I love you. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. And we talk almost every day, if not every day. So our relationship is built on the foundation of unconditional love no matter what. But even though there's unconditional love, it doesn't mean we can't disagree. We can't debate. We can't argue. But no matter what happens at the end of the argument, there's always coming back to, I love you. I'm here for you.
That's how you end a lot of your posts too. I noticed that in your theme, and you're tremendous on your social media and how you do it. And it's a lot to do with your authenticity and that you welcome comments and you're not going to slam someone for their opinion. You're actually going to chat with them about it. So it sounds like you got a lot of that from your mom's conversations.
Without question. And it's funny, I don't talk about my dad much. We don't really have much of a relationship at all. I haven't spoken to him in years. My dad's form of debate is raise my voice until you're scared enough, until you don't want to converse with me anymore. My mom's form of discussion is let's keep our voices normal and just have a intelligent discussion and let the argument speak for itself rather than trying to intimidate the other one. And I think I see a lot of people, fitness industry and outside the fitness industry, they try and get their point across through the use of fear or personal attacks or whatever, where it's like, for me, I hopefully have taken most of what I do for my mom in that I welcome any and all opinions. Let's just try and make your opinion stand on their own rather than using other things outside of it to try and bolster it up.
What was the catalyst that took you from, an avid competitor, fitness competitor, to somebody who wanted to spend the rest of his life and career helping others do it?
It's a really good question. So when I got the internship at the gym, it was called Punch Kettlebell Gym, and I was working under two amazing coaches, Kevin McCarthy and Stacy Shadler. They took me under their wing, and they were very science-based coaches. I was really lucky from a very young age, from 14, to be thrust into a science-based fitness industry. I didn't spend much time with the magazines or online articles. It was like, hey, we want you to read these research articles from these specific coaches who are very science-based. And I was thrust into the science-based world of coaching at a very young age. And I remember my first client at that gym was a 68-year-old guy named Fred. His sole goal was to be able to lift his grandson up without hurting his shoulders because he had torn shoulders, he had rotator cuff issues. And I was a 14-year-old wrestler. And my sole goal at that point in my life was to look good naked and perform well on the wrestling mat. I was like, that was it. I wanted abs and I wanted to do really well in wrestling. And I think one of the major benefits of what I did then was having the opportunity to understand everyone has different goals. It's hard to understand that in general, but especially as a kid, it's hard to sort of put yourself in other people's shoes. It's hard to have perspective enough to understand that not everyone is you or like you. And I remember when I started coaching Fred, very closely under the supervision of Kevin and Stacy, they would check my programming. They'd sort of walk around with me just to make sure nothing was going wrong. And what a blessing, Fred let me do that. Thinking back now, they definitely must have asked him, would you mind if he did this? And we'll obviously supervise. And I remember very vividly being I love coaching Fred. I like coaching. And it's a very different thing to go from I like fitness and working out and doing it for me versus I love coaching other people through it. I think it's one of the reasons this industry has the biggest burnout rate, or a huge burnout rate, is because a lot of people get into coaching. Number one, it's a very low barrier of entry. Anyone can become a coach. They just put coach in their Instagram profile. And then number two is a lot of people do it because they think, well, I like working out, so I'm going to love coaching people. It's not the same at all. Coaching people and working out yourself are very, very different. And I think the reason I sort of transferred into it very well is because I I really love coaching people. When I went to college, I started the powerlifting team at my school with two of my best buddies, and it grew from 3 of us to over 20 of us over the course of my 4 years. And I would spend my morning session training myself and then the 10 people. And then I'd go back to the gym that night and coach the other 10 people on the training team. And I would just coach them. It's like, I just love coaching. And that was a very seamless transition.
It's very much like a sales rep that just goes into management because they're like, this seems like it's the natural next step. And then they realize that I actually just like selling. I'm not a very good manager at all. I don't even like it.
That's exactly right.
The people who are interested in your content that I see, I mean, because I follow you, I've been following you for a lot of years. It seems to me like everybody who I've ever been to the gym with and has done personal training with me or as a personal trainer follows you. And then part 2, there's a lot of people who like just genuinely consume your content because it's comedic. And I think you do an excellent job at balancing. And I'll give an example. My personal trainer, Kyle, at Lifetime Fitness, follows you. And one time I brought a video of you showing the deadlift routine, and you were literally talking about getting your tits up, and you were doing all these things about it and joking it. I looked at Kyle and I said, hey, just out of sheer curiosity, if this is the only video you ever watched on deadlifting, and I went out and I deadlifted, would this help me? And he looked at it and was like, you'd be good. And I think you had an interesting way of really being comedic and doing that. How do you come up with this content that you can get the professionals to be like, yeah, that's pretty good, and you can get the amateurs to be like, yeah, I could try that? It's a very interesting mix.
When I first started making content, I didn't know it at the time, but my biggest insecurity was thinking other coaches would think that I was stupid. Which sort of makes sense from the perspective of not only was I in special education growing up and I didn't want people to think I was stupid, but also because when you're putting content out to the public, you want to impress your peers. Like you really want your peers to be like, oh, they know what they're talking about. And so I would make content, unfortunately, with the intent to impress my peers rather than to help the people who needed it. And so if you go back and look at that content, I was using big words, a lot of scientific references, things that just everyday people don't care about. But I did it solely because I knew there were other peers of mine, colleagues around the world, looking at it and scrutinizing it, and I wanted to cover my bases so they couldn't say, well, you're stupid. Once I got to a certain point where my business had started to grow enough and I became more accustomed to content creation and understanding which pieces of content were really driving my business the most, I realized I'm only doing this stuff to impress other people. I was like, the people who are paying me do not care about the citations. They do not care when I talk about anterior pelvic tilt or upper lower cross syndrome or they don't care. They don't know what it means. And the more I talk about it, the less they pay. I was like, and the less they pay, the less opportunity I have to actually help them with their goals. So growing up, I literally just made a video on TikTok the other day with like 7 different accents. I did like an Australian accent. I did a British accent, Southern accent. I always did accents. I rarely talk about it. I did theater for a large part of my youth. I did theater. I was in the musical Grease. I was in the musical Aladdin. I loved it, and I love acting. And so I remember there came a point in my content creation career. I was like, screw it, let's combine it. And I have tried a number of different things, and I found out that when I can make something funny and also educational, then it gets the best response from both worlds, as opposed to only funny or only educational. When you can combine them, you get a much better response. The reality is, though, I think if I had tried to do that too early on, I wouldn't have spent enough time really understanding the education side of it. So I think because I spent so long understanding the education, and fortunately the comedic side comes a little bit more naturally to me, I was more seamlessly able to get it together, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think people need to listen a lot more to what you just said, because when my trainer first used to say to me, like, okay, just use a supinated grip, I was like, I don't know what the hell that means. And to Kyle, like, we joked about it, like pronated and supernated. Like, I think one of my biggest accomplishments is I actually know what that means now. But like, it took a long time, and that's basic. That's basic. But we joke about that now. He's like, okay, just have your hands face you. Like that kind of stuff. Got it. Now I understand if you want me to do a chin up or a pull up. I didn't understand that. And I've been around fitness where I didn't get it. How you broke that down, I think more people need to listen to about a lot of us. I mean, Matt and I are in the insurance industry. We see a lot of our peers clearly trying to be kind of like insurance famous, and as opposed to either helping their team, helping their clients, helping their referral partners, and speaking language that they can understand. So you clearly did a crash course in speaking the language.
It's funny. Not 5 minutes before I got on this podcast, I was on Twitter scrolling through, and I'm in this thread. Someone tagged me in a thread, and I saw some of the answers coming through. And one of the coaches who was responding to the thread was talking about how they were using something called accommodating resistance. Now, on Twitter, you only have 140 characters or whatever it is. So this person writing, well, yeah, in order for me to do this, I've been using accommodating resistance in order to reduce the torque on my joints, blah, blah, blah. But what they did that was very interesting is after accommodating resistance, they put in parentheses and they wrote bands. Accommodating resistance is only bands. That's literally what it is. Accommodating resistance is a fancy piece of terminology that people say to try and sound smarter. So I was like, why didn't you just write bands? Why did you have to write accommodating resistance? And his whole tweet didn't fit. He had to write another tweet. And I was like, you could have saved a bunch of characters if you just took that word out instead of adding in parentheses bands. And the only reason someone would do that is because they want to sound like they've read a couple books on it, because they want to sound smart. It's like, interestingly, the smarter you try to sound, the less people you actually help. And the more you show your insecurity. And the only reason I know this is because I lived it. I did it. I did it for 4 years until I finally realized this is not helping anybody.
You almost think that you need to do it to be more credible, but you're turning people off because you're less relatable.
That's exactly right.
If you're not approachable, then who are you going to help? It's really interesting. For a lot of people that know you and follow you, know that you spent 3 years, coaching Gary. Could you talk about the catalyst that kind of created that opportunity?
Yes. So I started creating content in July of 2011. I was training at a gym called Westside Barbell, which is just like literally the strongest gym in the world. Their weakest guy squats 800 pounds. I was at Westside. It's an invite-only gym. They don't have a sign on the door. You don't get a membership card. There's like 14 lifters there or so at any time, and you have to be invited to train there. And I was invited to train there, and I was super lucky. And one of my mentors at the time, JC Dean, was like, where are you? And I was like, I'm at Westside. He was like, shut up. Like, you're at Westside Barbell? And I was like, yeah. He was like, you need to start a website. And I was 21 years old. And I was like, dude, I don't know how to start a website. He's like, all right, hold on. A couple hours later, I get an email, and he transferred SyattFitness.com to my name. He bought my website, set it up for me, transferred it to my name, and he said, start writing. And I was like, what do you mean? What am I going to write? And he was like, just help people. That's it. Just help people. And I was like, okay. So every week I wrote at least one new article. It was at least 1,500 to 2,000 words about what I was learning, what I was doing. And I did that every week, at least once a week, usually more. I would post on Facebook, but it was just purely under the recommendation of just help people. I didn't know an online business was possible. I didn't know PayPal.com existed. I had no idea online coaching was ever going to be a thing. Instagram didn't exist. So I did that for a long time, hundreds and hundreds of articles. One of my articles in 2012, it was one of my worst performing articles I've ever written. Very few people have ever read it. Very few people ever liked it. There were only a couple comments on it when I posted it. Keep in mind, my audience was very small. I maybe was getting 20 to 50 views on my website at any point in time, any day. And the vast majority of those were from my mom and myself. And one of the comments I got in that article was from a guy who I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about him. I just knew I got a comment. And he was asking me a question about the article. It was how to improve your posture if you work at a desk. He was asking me a question about something, and so I replied, and that was it. And I thought nothing of it, because anyone who ever replied or commented on my website, I always replied back, because there were so few of them, and I was so excited that they did. And it just so happened that that person who commented on that article was an accountant in Chicago at the time, in 2012. But by 2014, that accountant in Chicago had moved to New York City, become a personal trainer, and was Gary Vaynerchuk's first coach, Mike Vacanti. And I was literally just out with Mike 10 minutes ago. When Mike Vacanti's contract with Gary was up, Gary had a lot of neck problems, back problems, knee problems, hip problems. And Mike found me from something that was how to reduce your pain. And And he followed me ever since then. When his contract with Gary was up, Gary was like, who's going to coach me next? And he was like, I think I know a guy. And I was living in Israel at the time. And I got connected with Mike, and he was like, do you want to coach Gary? So I flew to New York from Tel Aviv. I coached Gary for an hour, flew back to Tel Aviv, didn't tell anybody what happened. And a month and a half later, I got offered the job.
Wow.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting. And so many levels.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to get one big moment.
That's exactly right.
And it's a lot of the questions you answer when you do Q&As beautifully, by the way. And it seems like you have a plethora of pictures of yourself somehow. We'll get into that later. But I think your Q&A, you try to tell people as well. It's like, it's not so much which diet you're using. It's not so much what you're doing. It's more the consistency and the persistence to carry it out and then seeing if the results are fitting what you're trying to do. And it seems like you did the same thing. It's kind of like, I don't know 100% why I'm writing all these articles, but my mission is to help people. And then you ended up helping one of the most influential people of our generation, really, that's an entrepreneur. Wow. One of my favorite theses of Gary is he says, you never know what piece of content is going to change your life forever. And when most people hear that, myself included, you usually think, well, one of my pieces of content are going to go viral. That's usually what you think. But that article that I wrote is, to this day, one of the least viewed, least liked articles I've ever written. It was just seen by the right person at the right time. And I replied to that individual. And then that individual ended up having some crazy chain of events. It's just like, you just never know who you're going to meet. You never know what you're going to do, how it's going to impact someone. And there are so many different metrics to measure things by. Virality and likes is not the most important, nor is it the only one. There are so many things to understand here, and it's the sum of all of your efforts, not just a single effort, that really matter.
What you've been sharing for the last 30 minutes, it's obvious to us now that, like, regardless of whether you had the relationship with Gary or not, massively successful because your work ethic, your creativity, your relation, the mindset, everything, your persistence and work. But wow, like that one opportunity that you created for yourself because of just helping people. That gentleman, it was JC. You said his name was
JC Dean. Yeah, he owns JCD Fit.
What an impact he had on you, given how young you were, and he was just like, hey, let me just help you along the way, a little catalyst for you.
I'll never forget it. I remember because I followed JC when I was in high school. I was 16, 17, 18 years old, following his website. And I remember, again, like, Facebook was relatively new. Instagram did not exist. And I remember following his website and thinking, I wonder if he has a Facebook. I just added him on Facebook. I didn't think he would accept my friend request. He accepted my friend request. And then in the chat bar, you see your like friends who are there, and you see like if they're available or not. And I remember my buddy David and I were obsessed with JC at the time. And JC must have been 24 or so, and I was 18. And I see like JC's available on Facebook. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder if I could message him and see. So I messaged him like, hey man, I'm not sure if you're going to see this, but I love your stuff. And then he replied. And my buddy David and I like freaked out. We were in my mom's kitchen and we were like talking to him, and we can't believe we're talking to JC Dean. This is so crazy. There's so many things that could have happened that would have led to me not having a website. But he was really the guy that took me from being 18 and literally having nothing to really being like, wow, like this, I could have a career in this field, really helping people. People a lot of times will ask me, why do you give away so much for free? Why do you hop on the call with random people? 90% of my business is free. 90% of everything I do is absolutely free. And I get on the phone with random people. Sometimes we'll go on and give random people my number and we'll talk. They're like, why do you do that? I'm like, because that's how I was brought up. I was brought up with people who gave me their time and their help for free. It's like, it's just, that's what I was lucky enough to have. And it's like, look at how much it's done for me. The impact that JC has had from simply helping a random 18-year-old kid is the impact that I would like to have 1,000-fold.
Yeah, it seems like you've got a tremendous combination of listening and acting. It seems like you're listening accurately, and then you also are acting a lot more than maybe you even give yourself credit for. I mean, there's a lot of like things that you're like doing quickly, as opposed to just listening, internalizing it, and thinking about it. And that leads to my question. I asked a lot of the trainers at Lifetime, like, hey, what's a question you'd want to ask Jordan? Just out of curiosity. And one of the question I got from like almost the exact same from every single person, I'm going to read it to you. And I think I already know your answer based on what you're saying, is how did you mentally handle coaching Gary Vee and putting your own training on the back burner?
It's a great question. It was actually, I've spoken about it a little bit, but it was very difficult at first. Keep in mind, I went from elite world-class powerlifter. I deadlifted 4 times my body weight. I was walking around 8-9% body fat year round. I didn't miss a single workout for 5 years, not one single workout. I went from elite world-class powerlifter to coaching Gary and basically fully understanding I was about to gain a lot of body fat and lose a significant amount of muscle. I knew it going into it. And even though I knew it, I'd say the first 3 months were absolutely terrible for me. I almost quit a number of times in the first 3 months. I was in college. I hated college with all of my heart. Every ounce of my body and being and soul hated college. I almost dropped out. I almost got a one-way ticket to Israel and joined the Israeli Defense Force. I spoke to my family friend who's a psychologist. And basically he was like, listen, you're not going to drop out of college, namely because you don't have a relationship with your father. You don't want to lose a relationship with your mom. And I knew if I dropped out of college, my mom would be very upset. Like I didn't want to ruin that. He was like, you're in detention. He was like, you have 3.5 more years of detention. That's what you're in. He's like, you can either spend these next 3.5 years sitting in detention, twiddling your thumbs, being really angry, or you can spend these next 3.5 years in detention doing something worthwhile, enjoying it, whatever. That's why I started the powerlifting team. It's why it's like I kept making so much content on my website. So much of that came from the mentality of I'm in detention. So how are you going to spend your time in detention? And so I applied that to a number of areas of my life, not least of which my time with Gary. I was like, I'm in detention right now. It was a great detention. There's so much good that came out of it, but I knew that in this 3-year window of detention, my body fat was going to go up, my strength was going to go down, my own fitness was going to go on the back burner. And I mentally prepared myself for it. And I was like, it's going to be worth it. Like, it's worth it. I was like, there's so many ways to look at it, but like, okay, spending 3 years staying around the same level of body fat and maybe slightly increasing my strength versus spending 3 years reducing muscle mass, increasing body fat slightly, and changing hundreds of thousands of lives around the world, I think that's probably worth it because I know how to get my fitness back on track. I know what I need to do. And when you know how to get stronger, you know how to lose body fat, the mystique of finding the key or the secret is gone. It's like, it's not like oh my God, what if I can't? It's like, I always know what I need to do. So it's not like a scary thing anymore. But I didn't really know how to have an impact that I wanted. So it's like, I'm going to go all in during this detention to really learn this. Understand that you can't be at the top of your game in everything at all times. So I'm going to go all in here, get as high as I can, get as good as I can. And then eventually I can have more balance when detention is over. But I think too many people are searching for balance all of the time. When the reality is, if you ever want to reach a certain height in something, if you ever want to be really good at one thing, there must be periods of unbalance in order to reach that level.
We couldn't agree with you more. You know, when we've had moments of 6 months, 12 months where we felt very comfortable, we knew the boomerang was coming and we were going to feel some pain soon, or we were going to create it, because that's not where you grow, you know, when you're comfortable. One of my favorite pieces of your website, you said anyone who wants results with their health and fitness must act like a unicorn that they are, toss any excuses out the common room window, and make today your chocolate-covered strawberry biche, which is it's just funny. But the point of me bringing it up is, you know, and we know how much of an impact and how important the mental side of what your clients or what anyone in fitness is trying to accomplish, how much that matters versus the actual physical necessity of putting in the work. How do you coach your clients on the mental side, which really matters, while also making sure that their functional fitness is correct and their movement patterns are right and everything else?
Man, I've made multiple hour-long courses on that. So it's like it's a long discussion, but here's the most important part about any goal that we have in life, fitness or business or whatever. The most important and overlooked and under-discussed aspect of it is something called self-efficacy. This is the base of everything. Self-efficacy it's defined as an individual's belief in their ability to succeed at a given task. It's like self-confidence, but it's not the exact same. It's a specific individual task. And the way I explain it is this. If I told you, let's say you have $0 in your bank account, zero. Hopefully that's not true, but you got $0 in your bank account. If I told you that if you raise $10,000 today in less than 24 hours, and you buy a lottery ticket with those $10,000, you will win $1 million. I guarantee you would find a way to raise those $10,000, promising people whatever, signing your life away, like that you have a 98% chance of winning $1 million. You'd still do it because it's like you have a 98% chance. Of course, that'd be insane not to do that. You'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. On the other hand, let's say you have $100,000 in your bank account. If I told you that if you spend $10,000 on a lottery ticket today, you have a 15% chance of winning $1 million, might not be worth it. Like, you know, you have the money, but you just might not. I don't know if I want to take that much money out on a 15% chance. And what that shows you is when someone believes in their ability to succeed, they're going to go out of their way to do the things that need to be done in order to succeed. It's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't think that you can actually lose 50 pounds, then why would you go to the grocery store and spend time picking things out? Why would you spend time meal prepping? Why would you spend time working out? Why would you bother reducing your alcohol intake? It's like you don't think you're going to do it anyway. So why would you bother? So for me, my number one goal is I have to measure their self-efficacy. And there are a number of ways that you can get a gauge on someone's self-efficacy. One of my favorite ways to measure self-efficacy, it's a scale of 1 to 10. So I say on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely not confident at all, like you 100% know you will not be able to succeed. 10 being 100% confident you know you'll be able to succeed. Where do you fall on this scale of your ability to succeed by the time we stop working together? I said this to thousands of people over the course of years. And consistently, people who scored 7 out of 10 on a consistent basis, because it's not just a one-time measurement, you have to repeatedly take it, but people who consistently scored 7, 8, 9, or 10 were radically more likely to succeed than the people who scored 6 or below on a consistent basis. So as soon as I saw someone was 6 or below, my sole purpose before focusing on their movement, before focusing on their nutrition, it was to increase their self-efficacy. Now, what that means is it doesn't mean I don't do anything fitness or strength training or nutrition related. What it does mean is I moderate what I give them to make sure that they can do it no matter what. I make it so simple, so easily, so fun, so digestible that they can do it without question. And once they start doing it, immediately their self-efficacy increases, even regardless of how small it is, even if it's walking for 5 minutes, even if it's just having 3 pieces of fruit in a week. Whatever it is, just getting them to succeed at something. Because once they start to succeed, then they start to believe they can succeed, and then they start taking more action. As soon as someone gets to that 7 point and above, then I can start really pushing them. I can start challenging them. The people who respond well to a little bit of tough love are the people who already believe in themselves. The people who don't respond well to tough love don't believe in themselves. So all you're adding to the fire is more disbelief. So you have to alter your coaching based on who you're working with and where they are in the process. So really, it's really understanding how much do they believe in themselves, how do you increase their belief, and then understanding how do you approach them based on where they are.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think coaches of all kind need to re-listen to that point. I don't care what you're doing. That's massive. Whether it's baseball, fitness, life coach, that's massive. What would you say is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love? Something you do all the time that many people would find kind of odd.
I spend an inordinate amount of time making content for social media. I hired a videographer to follow me around all the time, like Gary does with D-Rock. I spend hours every day answering random people's DMs and messages. My girlfriend, she's just used to it now. It's funny. She'll just like laugh because she'll just read them with me as I reply. But it's like I spend a ton of time on social media, and I genuinely really love it and enjoy it. I think a lot of the narrative around social media nowadays is it's negative, it's bad, too much time on it. And yeah, I think it's possible to go too much time on it for sure. But my time on social media, I'm consuming very little. Like a lot of people, literally just earlier today, my buddy Kevin was asking, he's like, what podcast do you listen to? I was like, I don't listen to any podcasts. And he was like, well, who do you follow on social media? I was like, I really only follow people who are like clients of mine or my member. Like I don't follow I don't consume anyone. I think for me, that's one of the reasons I'm able to be so consistent and make so much content is because I'm not looking at what other people are doing. And I think I think it's a little bit weird, to be honest with you. I don't think that's normal. But yeah, I think it's probably one of the weirder things.
Well, you got me in trouble the other day because I was going through your stories, and when you do that big ass salad thing, the theme is The Lion King, and my kids love The Lion King, and so it came on, and my son Mason was like. So he like instantly thought we were gonna start watching, and he wouldn't shut up about it. So that got me in trouble.
So many messages about that, like parents being like, "I have to watch your stories on silent just in case this pops up," because my kids got freaked out. One mom messaged me last week saying her daughter has an irrational fear of it, and she heard it and started crying as soon as it came on. And someone asked me recently, they were like, are you going to keep the same theme song to your salads all the time? Or are you going to change it? And I was like, why would I change it? Because I guarantee every time you hear that song, you're going to think about me. And every time you have a salad, you're going to think about me and hear that song. It's just super fun. I'm always going to keep that for sure.
You're dead on. You're dead on. Who is your mentor right now, if you would say you have one?
So I have a buddy of mine. His name's Pat Flynn. So Mike Vicanti is he's my best friend in the world. Mike Vicanti, and then my buddy Pat Flynn, and all three of us every Saturday we have like a philosophy and theology book club essentially that we all do on Skype. And Pat he's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and I'd say he's one of my main mentors at the moment. He's been for years. He really helped me out with email marketing many, many years ago. But Pat's a genius. He's an absolute genius. He's incredible with philosophy. I'm really diving more into a lot of Aristotle and Plato and the philosophy world, and sort of combining that with theology. So my buddy Pat Flynn, I'd say he's a close mentor of mine.
Is it for personal interest? You enjoy that, or do you feel like that's helping you grow and become a better professional and friend and partner?
I'd say all of that. I've always associated as being Jewish, but more for the community aspect as opposed to the religious aspect. Mike is a Protestant, Pat is a Catholic, and I'm a Jew. And so it's like we're sort of like all over the place, but it's more about being more interested in becoming a better human overall. This is one thing actually I almost disagree with Gary on a little bit. Gary always talks about kindness, how kindness is so important. Kindness and like being a kind human being is incredibly important. But one thing that I've been learning in this philosophy theology discussion is kindness at the expense of truth is not really kindness. And kindness at the expense of honesty is oftentimes you're doing something to not hurt someone's feelings, when the truth is maybe telling them the truth would actually be more kind and help them get the help that they need. So one thing I've been discussing, really pushing myself as a human to do more now, is telling the truth, even and especially when it's the most difficult, even when it might hurt someone's feelings, even when I'm concerned about the repercussions it might have on me. I think for me to be the best human that I can, the best partner that I can, the best boss that I can, the best content creator, the best coach, whatever, I need to understand, number one, there are many, many, many people greater than I am. There's a God greater than I am. And sort of having that perspective allows me to be more humble, be more honest, be more accurate. And I think one of the reasons that people will not be honest, or people will use kindness as justification to not be honest, is they're fearful of the repercussions that could have on them. And I think having a greater fear above that will often take away that fear, that humanistic fear, and allow you to be more honest in the moment.
Well said. There's the personal development and relationship books specifically about that, and I've enjoyed reading that before, and I've had personally some aha moments. So I was chuckling inside when you're talking about that, because I was kind of pointing the finger at myself for many years on that one issue. And when I read that 3 or 4 years ago, it kind of clicked, and ever since I've been trying myself personally to do a much better job at being honest, even if it's at the short-term expense of someone's feelings. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really accurate.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last question that's on my mind is so we're respectful of your time too, and I appreciate how much you shared. I think with a lot of people, I have a page full of notes. I didn't expect to have a page full of notes, and I got to tell you, a year ago today, if you told me I'd have a page full of notes from a personal trainer, I'd say, "What are we working out on?" But
delts, all delts.
I love your quote where you said, you paraphrase Gary's quote of your insecurities are the jail of your emotions. I love that. Now, I think it's also a very misunderstood quote, because I think sometimes people confuse vulnerabilities where what they want to say that they've tackled. It's not really a scar. It's more they just want to talk about what they've conquered. You know what I mean? So how would you encourage someone to actually talk about their insecurities, the real ones, the ones that you actually struggle with, as opposed to the surface ones that you just might want to talk about?
I think you just made a very important distinction that I haven't even articulated, but you're exactly right. It's one thing to talk about what you're insecure about now, in this moment. It's another thing to talk about an insecurity that you've already overcome, right? It's like, in the past, I was insecure about this, or in the past, I struggled with this. It's very difficult. It's very different and difficult to talk about in this moment what you're scared about. So, for example, right now, when we were talking about theology and personal interest and why am I doing it, I could feel myself being insecure to talk about having like a greater God, a greater being, because I know there will be some people who will not like that immediately. Immediately, they'll be turned off by it. They won't like it. But that's just where I'm at in my life. I knew the right thing for me was to say the truth. This is exactly what I'm feeling. This is why I'm doing it. And if someone doesn't like that, that's okay. That's on them, whether or not they choose to keep listening. I think it's important to recognize what you're struggling with in this moment. And it's usually, if you're hesitant to say something, if you're hesitant to be open about something, odds are it's something you're insecure about right now. If it's something you're very proud of, if it's something that you've overcome, it doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile to share, but it does mean that it's not a current insecurity. So I think one of the best parts of that quote, that your insecurities are the jail of your emotions, it means it's something that you're scared for people to find out about. Mm-hmm. That if you're worried that someone's going to find out that you've done it, that you did it, that you're doing it, that it's you're worried about being uncovered or the truth being told or people calling you out, that's what you need to talk about right now. Because once you talk about that, they can't find you out anymore. If they say something, it's, oh, well, no, you said it first. It's like, you told everyone. Once it's out there in the public, it can't be found out. It's no longer a secret. That's the big difference there, is once it's no longer a secret, you own all of it. You own the power, because you were honest about it. You said, listen, this is what I'm going through. I did this. This was wrong, whatever it is. Mm. But if they find out, and then that's when shit happens. That's when it's bad. So for you to come out first with it is the hardest, but it's also the most important.
Oh, it's like George Costanza. I feel like, I think you nailed it. That's an awesome answer. I think that'll help a lot of people. It's not overcoming. It's just what you really are nervous is coming out. I wrote that down. I think that's a huge win. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting topic because there's a lot of people who may not even be aware of their insecurities. And so there's definitely a path of self-awareness before you can actually do exactly what you said. And so, but it's exposure. You got to expose yourself. And if someone's listening to this, that might be the light bulb that creates realization. But
it's very hard, even when you're aware of it. I struggle with it every day. It's very, in that moment, I almost didn't say what I thought about God just because but when you're more aware of it, then you can start to call yourself on it and start to make a habit of actually doing what you think is right in that moment. And I make mistakes all the time, every day. I screw up way more than I'm actually successful. But I think that's part of one of the great parts about being more self-aware and calling yourself on your nonsense is then you can start to make a habit of doing what you actually know is right, not what is easy.